we'll go for that. Hi, everybody. We've been having technical difficulties today. Like Michael said, Zoom probably figured out that a Jew and a Black person were talking and decided to shut us down. So we're just going to record our conversation and then post it on Facebook later. So if you have any questions during our conversation, please feel free to post them in the comments, and we'll address them later. So my guest tonight on Shooting the Breeze is Michael Lifshitz. Thank you, Michael, for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me. I just want to add that people, if you don't like this video and share it a lot, the KKK wins. So if you don't like this video, you support the KKK and are a horrible person. Sorry.
I forgot to say that. Thank you.
Political correctness is not my strong point. I think a Black person, a disabled Jew, we're like the KKK's worst nightmare.
Exactly. We're on the pictures of us are on the walls of their clubhouse or their.
This is what we can't allow to happen. But anyway.
Oh, we gotta laugh.
And you know what? The reason that joke came up is because I saw a video on Twitter of a KKK rally in Georgia, and the KKK was marching, saying that they were here to stay, and it was a small group, which I strangely found comfortable because they were small, and people were commenting that the police were just standing watching this happening, and then the comments deteriorated from there. So I figured, okay, let me take my shot in at the KKK. I'm all for people being able to belong to and have different opinions, but I feel like there's not really a two side to the KKK. I guess my future as president of the U.S. is out the window because I don't think there's fine people in there.
Exactly. Because those aren't your kind of fine people. Jesus.
I feel like they probably wouldn't accept me. Something tells me between a Jew, disabled, I don't think that. Honestly, maybe not the disabled, probably more the Jew. They'll probably think the disability was a punishment for being Jewish, but anyway, moving right along. Okay, enough about them. Let's talk comedy. Okay.
Let's talk comedy. How do we get on from there? From the dumpster fire that we're in right now.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I think I don't. I don't know. I think you have to find the comedy in the dumpster fire that the world is in. Yeah. Anyway, okay, that's way too serious. We'll go back. Let's go back to comedy. This is getting way too serious.
I know I'm gonna cry.
I try not to think about the state of the world.
I know, because it's so depressing. It's so upsetting and depressing. So, okay, let's do comedy.
Okay, comedy. Let's go.
How long have you been doing comedy?
Sorry?
Oh, yeah, and I was going to say, and what motivated you to start?
Okay, so I started comedy in January 2006. So it's been 14, in January it was 14 years, which interestingly is the longest I've done a job, because I've changed jobs, which I think says something about, I don't know if it says something about comedy in my bank account. I'm not sure what it says, but it's interesting. But anyway, so the reason I started, I lost a bet, like most people who started comedy. So what happened was I was out with a friend of mine. We were out a bunch of guys for dinner back when we were allowed to go out to restaurants. I remember those days. They were fun. The restaurant days.
Yeah, friends.
Huh. We sat around, had dinner. It was a good time. But anyway, we were out for dinner, and one of my friends goes, "Mike, you're funny. You should do an open mic night." And he also had, and I'm like, "Well, he had done it a couple of times." I'm like, "Well, you should do one." And we had a debate about which Sunday Super Bowl was on. And we were both idiots because the dates we picked weren't even Sundays. So I don't know how. So we were both
Super Bowl
wrong, and
Thursday.
and I don't know how I'll actually come back to a joke about Super Bowl Thursday. I'm going to come back. There's something funny about
Okay.
that. Um, but anyway, so we both lost, so we had to do it. And at the time, so I was going through a tough time. Um, I had just gotten the wheelchair, so the wheelchair I use. So forever, just in case anybody outside of our comedy fans who know me watches this video, um, I how's that for self confidence? It remember if you don't watch it, you're supporting the KKK.
You're
Um,
supporting the Klan if you don't
um,
watch this and
but
share it.
so I don't know why I'm pointing at the wheelchair because nobody can see I'm pointing at the wheelchair. But anyway, so the wheelchair, I got the wheelchair um, in 2005, and I was getting frustrated with people's attitudes about people in wheelchairs. Like I moved out on my own, and I got my own condo, and I went to buy furniture, and I go into the store, and as an accountant, I like the no interest payments for 36 months. So I'm like, okay, I'll finance all the furniture, and there were three different stores I went to, and every store the guy was like, well, how are you going to qualify for financing? I'm like, with my job.
Yeah.
And like I was working a management position in accounting at McGill, so I mean I had a good salary. I had a good salary. There was no reason I wouldn't qualify,
Right.
um, and so there was that, and also the relationship I was in ended in part because of the disability, which, as one of my friends pointed out, Mike, it took her over a year and a half to realize that you were disabled. Um, fair, that's a fair point. It anyway, moving on. So yeah, so I actually have a joke I do in my act about that. Ladies, if you're with a guy and he can take off his leg while having sex, that's a sign that something's going on. Um, which is not so much a joke as that I'm a skill I'm proud of, and you can't really show that off. It's awkward. So I worked it
And
into
that's
the
a very
comedy routine.
specific skill
Yeah,
for a
it's a very
very
specific
specific
skill.
time.
Yeah, I also feel now's a good time to mention I have an artificial leg because otherwise that just sounds awkward.
You just
So
walk
yeah, it's
around
the
with one.
awkward. Yeah. I just kind of shop it off for fun.
For
But
shits and
yeah, so
giggles. Yeah.
so there was the ending the relationship, the people's attitudes. So I wanted to do talking or writing or something about educating people on people with abilities. And I lost this bet to do comedy. And I had seen there was a comic, his name's Chris Finesca. He's a Mexican American, and he goes by the name Crazy Legs. And so he has cerebral palsy, and he was at Just for Laughs, and he comes out on his walker and sits down on a chair. And he made this joke about how every time he's arguing with his wife, she tells him to stop shaking his head at her. And I thought that was because he had like the spasms, right? And I'm like, I thought that was just a clever, fun way to let people into your world. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to do jokes about the disability. So my standard joke about that I have the first joke I ever told, which I still tell today, is that I have a condition called multiple congenital musculoskeletal abnormality, which is the medical term for slightly effed up.
You can say you
Just in
say
case any
it.
kids say it are here, I think we all know what the effed up stands for. Um, like really, with everything going on in the world, that word is going to be what corrupts our youth. Totally. But
Exactly. Exactly.
um,
The F word.
anyone who says that's a bad thing, have you watched the news lately?
Exactly.
Um,
Have you been paying attention? Like
it's,
that.
um, go to Twitter and look at the real Donald Trump, and then talk to me. But anyway,
Exactly.
um, so yeah, so that's how I got started. I did. So back in those days, Comedy Net had their open mic on Friday nights at 10:30.
Was this in
And
Montreal? This was in Montreal?
in Montreal, yeah. So I grew
Okay.
up in Montreal. I moved
Oh, me
here.
too. I did
Yeah,
too.
I lived in Montreal till 2013, December 2013. I moved here.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
so I started at Comedy Nest. So it's always fun when I go back to Comedy Nest, just because it was like the first place I ever did comedy. The first paid show I ever did was at Comedy Nest. Like all
Oh,
my firsts were there. Um, it so yeah, it's I started and I remember the first night. So the show started at 10:30. I left the club around 12:30 in the morning. I don't think I fell asleep till 3:30 because it's just the high
yeah. Oh,
of
yeah.
having gotten a laugh. Like even to this day, like when you get on stage and that first laugh,
Oh,
like
yeah. It's exhilarating.
okay, so we've been trying to do shows on Zoom and keep it going, but there it is really not the same as being on a stage, having
Yeah,
people talking
you
to
can,
you.
because you can feel it. You
It
feel it.
like, and
Yeah.
I know there's nothing better than a full house at a comedy club on a Saturday night doing a show. I realize we're going to be a long ways away from a
Yeah.
full house, because I'm pretty sure even after opening there'll be the uh, reduced capacity and social
Yeah.
distancing and all
And
that
then
fun
phase
stuff.
two of lockdown is
Yeah,
gonna
yeah.
happen.
So that's why I'm still working on developing the online show because I think I'll still be doing that for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
Um,
Same.
but yeah, so that's how I got started back in Montreal, and then I would say until I moved to Ottawa, it was kind of let's see what happens. I think since I moved to Ottawa, I've gotten more serious. I know it sounds weird, but more serious about comedy, like actually looking for opportunity and building myself up as a comic and trying to do more and more stuff. Like I actually, so I had planned to do a one man show at the Fringe Festival, um, and actually, I think tonight, I think beginning of next week was supposed to be the preview for the Fringe Festival.
Oh, yeah.
So the plan was that I was going to do the show and then record it and try to make an album out of it. So that's kind of been pushed off till next year, just because obviously no Fringe Festival.
Right.
And someone said, "Well, why don't you do it on Zoom?" I don't feel you get the same crowd reaction that would you would want for an album on Zoom as you would on
In a live crowd with a live
in like
crowd.
a live crowd. So
Yeah.
2021 Fringe,
Yeah.
be there. That's my
Okay.
plan. Zoom
Hopefully.
something or other. I'm an optimist. I'm going with the theory. If the world doesn't end before then,
Yeah. If it doesn't
because
implode on itself
uh,
before then.
it, I figure we gotta get through pandemic, an election,
Oh God,
maybe a
yeah, I forgot
pandemic
about the
too.
US. Yeah, I forgot
Yeah,
about the
that's gonna
American
be
election.
interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I'm wondering if anyone's thought about building a wall here for Canada yet.
We need
I
a
feel like
wall
that might be an option.
or an electrified fence. One of the
I don't know. I don't
other.
know.
Something.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. But anyway, back to comedy.
So, since like you started on a bet, like, did you enjoy stand-up comedy before?
Oh
Like,
yeah, yeah. Like I
yeah.
always loved stand up. I always loved doing stand up. I always loved watching stand up. So my big thrill when I moved to Ottawa was the first time Mike McDonald saw me at Yuck Yucks and complimented my set and gave
Oh
me
wow,
pointers of what to do. Like pointers and
wow.
lines and jokes and stuff. And I was like on cloud nine, right? 'Cause
Yeah, no
I
kidding.
I had seen him. I guess I was maybe like 19, 20 at Comedy Works just for laughs. Because like during just for laughs, they do the galas, but then they do all the
Hmm.
club stuff.
Yeah.
I forget what the show had. It might have been Best of the Fest or one of the shows that was at Comedy Works because like Comedy Works was they're not there anymore, but um, I remember
It was
going to
on
him
Renee
there.
Levesque before, eh?
Comedy
Uh,
Works was on Bishop. The one on
Oh,
Rennie Levesque
Bishop,
that you're
yes.
thinking of was Comedy
Comedy
Zone.
Works or
Comedy Zone.
Comedy
So
Zone. Okay.
yeah,
There was a Comedy Works too at one point.
so Comedy Nest used to be actually Comedy Nest. So Comedy Nest started on Crescent Street and then moved to into the Nouvelle
Well,
Hotel on Rennie Levesque,
okay, yes.
which
And
is I
then
think what you're thinking of, and then they
yeah,
moved to the Pepsi Forum.
to the Pepsi Forum,
So
which I
then
still can't say Pepsi Forum. It's the Forum or the old Forum. It's so
yeah, I
weird to
know.
say Pepsi
Every time
Forum.
I go in there, I'm like, there was one day I was at Comedy Nest, and the Canadians had gotten knocked off out of the playoffs by the Bruins, and they
Oh,
showed it on
that's so
big
sad.
screen in the Pepsi Forum. And I came out and I'm like, it just feels sacrilege to be
Yeah,
watching this happen in this building. I'm like,
just turn
that's
it
it, I'm
off.
leaving.
Exactly.
It growing up in Montreal, I like in the '80s, I was really big on the Boston Montreal rivalry.
Oh yeah, me
So
too.
like,
Me too.
not a lot of hockey teams. Like that's the Montreal like last year in the playoffs. People were getting angry at me because they thought I was like a traitor because I was rooting for Toronto to beat Boston. I'm like, okay, but guys, like
Yeah,
when we when we grew up, Toronto. Toronto Montreal rivalry wasn't what it was in the old days because we never met in the playoffs.
yeah,
Every year,
exactly.
because of the old Adams division, we'd meet Boston, and those were the epic battles
Mhm. Mhm.
that I remember. And like I had a friend in school who was rooting for the Bruins, so we used to give each other a hard time. Um, and actually, one year I went. I had a doctor in Boston, and one year we went for a checkup to see the doctor, and it was the day after the Canadians knocked Boston out of the playoffs. So we flew down, and I decided to wear my Canadian sweater. And the cab driver told my parents, you're lucky your kid is cute because otherwise that could be dangerous. And then like on the blackboard at the hospital, it's like Canadians number one, like the
Oh
little
God,
Canadian symbol, Canadians number one, Bruins suck. um, yeah,
it's a good thing you were a kid. Like
I'd love to say that I've since matured. Not really. I'd probably do the same thing now, if I'm being totally honest.
oh,
All in good fun, though, of course.
of course.
Like when the Bruins won, I wasn't one of these hardline fans. Like when they won the cup, I wasn't one of these hardline fans who hoped something bad would happen. I just hoped they'd celebrate with bad fish and get violent diarrhea. But other than that, um,
Other than
I
that,
I
you wish
hope
them
they'd
the
feel
best.
better after that. I'm like, congratulations, may you get violent diarrhea was how I felt. Yeah.
But just for
So,
one day.
yeah. I'm not a violent person.
You're not a
I'm not.
monster.
I'm not. I'm not. I'm not a mean person. I just. Um, if they had some bad fish, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah,
Is all I'm
so
saying.
so be it. That's life.
These things happen. Um, but yeah. So yeah. Yeah. I don't. I don't know how we got to Boston. Anyway, in any case, oh yeah, because Boston beat Montreal at the Pepsi Forum.
Oh yes, and
So yeah,
you saw it when you're in the
so
Pepsi
yeah,
forum. Yeah, that would have
so
felt very sacrilegious. Like that.
it just felt wrong. Like I was of the school of thought that the old forum should have been made into like a shrine to the Canadians.
Yeah, it felt. I don't know. It felt because that happened like was that early '90s, late '80s, early '90s, right? That they shut it down.
It was like 90. They moved into the Bell Center in '96. So in the
'96.
spring of '96.
Okay. Yeah, because it was just it just felt wrong. Like I remember the first time I went in there after it was converted, when and the team had moved to the whatever it's called now, the
The
one near Bonaventure,
Yeah, the is it Bell Center?
Bell
No,
Center.
Molson Center. It was
Yeah,
Molson
because I know
Center,
it's
then
changed.
Bell Center, then back to Molson Center.
Oh, at Molson
I
Bell, then
think.
Molson. Okay. Yeah,
I
I can
think
never keep track of the name. But the
it.
first time I went to like the Pepsi Forum after it turned into a mall, basically, it just felt wrong.
Yeah,
Felt so like this isn't right. This isn't right.
It
Yeah.
that is one thing I will say about the Canadians. I think are one professional sports team that is never going to move or leave the city, or because
Oh God.
honestly, there won't be a city left. if that happens.
Exactly. The city will lose
And
its freaking mind and
it
like burn to the ground. Yeah.
like
Yeah. It
I
wouldn't be
think
pretty.
so. Like when Maurice Richard passed away, I was working for a guy who was British from the UK, and he was saying because it was people were comparing the loss of Maurice Richard to Princess Diana. He's like, isn't that overdone? And I'm like,
Yeah.
not at all, because you got to understand in Montreal, the Canadians are like royalty. Like when I was working at Nortel, and which by the way, it wasn't my fault, and I'm sorry.
So it
I
was you.
just
You
every
brought
time I
Nortel down.
mention Nortel, I feel I have
It
to
was like,
mention
ooh,
it was not my fault. It
sure it wasn't. Sure, sure.
My all-time favorite was I ran into my grade six English teacher at a shopping center, and she asked what I was up to, and I said I had left working at Nortel and started my own business. And she goes, "You worked at Nortel?" And I said, "Yeah." And this was like the most proper, polite person I've ever met. And she's like, "Well, they can all go to hell."
Oh, geez.
All right,
And you're like,
okay. So what you're telling me is you lost some money. All right.
yeah.
But I was taken aback because, like I said, the most proper person. But I remember when I was working at Nortel, the flags outside were lowered to half mast twice while I was there. Once was Pierre Elliott Trudeau passed away, and once was Maurice Richard. And
I
there was
believe
even
it.
on our inner company TV, they had Salut le Rocket, like they had a tribute
Oh.
to him playing on the inner TV. It just that
Hmm.
that's one thing about, and I miss like Ottawa. You see how fans react to the Senators, and it's like everybody's a Sens fan when they're in the playoffs, and then
Nobody
it's
cares
you fucking
otherwise.
suck, they're horrible. Oh my god, fire everybody. What I love is this thing Melnick out, like that they should fire Melnick. He's the owner. It's his team. You
You
can't
can't
fire
get rid of
him.
it.
He's not gonna fire himself.
He's the only
Um,
person that can't be fired.
there was like someone who spent like $10 million on an ad for like an ad, like a billboard about Melnick out, and I'm like, how? What? Think how much good could be done with that
With
money
that money,
for something
exactly. If he
useful.
done a Google search, like
I
this
mean,
device,
maybe they
who
could have
owns the
kept
Senate?
Alfredson for a year. But yeah, that's what I miss about, and what I miss about Montreal hockey fans. Like the first year they missed the playoffs in '95, which I wore black to school. Like that's how hard I took the news. Like I didn't comprehend because I always thought that the hockey playoffs were the Canadians and 15 other teams. Like I just was
Well, it
like,
was a dark day for all of us. I
I'm like,
remember that.
what?
What's
It
happening?
does not compute. Um, And as I'm thinking
Exactly.
about it, I'm like, I really miss those days when my biggest problem was that,
Oh yeah, I know, eh?
like that is
Jeez.
like when the Canadians missing the playoffs was my biggest worry in life. I miss those days,
I
but
know. I
um,
know. It was a
but yeah,
simpler time.
it was a simpler time that I remember the NHL awards did this hilarious thing at the opening. They showed different fans at the Hall of Fame with the Stanley Cup, Hockey Hall of Fame with the Stanley Cup, and there was a New Jersey fan like shaking champagne, spraying it, and jumping up and down. And then they had a guy in a Canadian jersey, and you see his lip quivering, and then he drops to his knees, going, "Why, why?" And I'm like, it was so good. Um, but now we're used to the playoff missing the playoffs. Although let's give
It
Mark
had been a
Bergevin
while.
credit because all he needed to make the playoffs was a global pandemic. So well done, Mark Bergevin. His plan worked, Everybody's been saying get a scoring center. All he needed was a
It
global
was a
pandemic.
global pandemic. Because
Um,
when is the season starting? Because I got a notice, but I can't remember
I
when this
think
playoff stuff
the
starts.
training camps are starting July 10th. So I think I don't understand. I'll be honest, I don't fully get how
Yeah,
they
I don't
plan
get it.
to do it because like they're starting July 10th, the training camps, and
Those go
I'm
for what,
guessing
like
maybe
two
that
weeks?
goes for a week or two. So it's mid-July before we start the qualifying now.
Yeah,
So the, and then like it's gonna be end of
it'll be like
August at
October.
least by the time they finish the playoffs. Um, which I think is gonna be weird to like. I'm having AC on while watching a hockey playoff is gonna be a weird. Like it seems weird.
Because
Like
as it
people are
is,
gonna
like
be
a
on
normal
pennies.
season, it would be ending like around this time. It usually ends like
Yeah.
early mid June. So
So
that's
so
like,
actually,
oh,
June 9th was the 27-year anniversary of the Canadians' last Stanley Cup.
wow.
27 years. It
I remember
yeah.
precisely when the last time they won, because I was engaged. I was living in Lachine, and I had ruptured two discs in my back, and so I was laid up in my apartment on my
Was
bed.
that like celebrating the win?
No,
Because
no, no.
okay.
I'd had an accident.
Oh,
I'd
okay.
had an
Because I'm like,
accident.
I'm a hockey fan, but that's taking it to another level.
It wasn't a hockey injury.
Okay,
Yeah, so I
okay.
was like laid up in bed. I'd been in the hospital in traction, and so I was released at home. And my fiance at the time brought my TV from the living room into my bedroom, and I remember we watched all the playoffs
All
there.
right,
And then
I like
when
it.
I remember scoring, I went yay, and I like ow, 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 ow.
It's funny you say that because so I don't know if you remember the game two of the series when the Eric Desjardins there was the famous stick call and they went into overtime and then Eric Desjardins scored the winning goal in overtime because what's his name Jacques Demers challenged I think it was Gretzky's stick that he had an illegal
Oh yeah.
curve. Was it
Oh,
Gretzky
I
or
remember something.
McSorley? I forget who, but I remember one of the
I
Kings had
remember.
an illegal stick, and they got a penalty, and the Canadiens scored the tying goal on the power play, and then they went into overtime, and Eric Desjardins scored. So when Eric Desjardins scored the winner, I was lying on the couch. I jumped up, and I managed to like pull my shoulder. That's how out of shape I am. I get injured watching the hockey.
Watching
That
sports.
that is not good. That is not good for my overall health and well-being. But yeah, I that series was so much fun because so I was in CEGEP at the time. I was doing an intensive French course um, to make up some credits. Because what happened was when I started, so the woman who was in charge of services for disabled students was pretty useless, to be quite frank.
Don't
um,
hold back.
like,
Tell me how
like
you
the one
feel.
time,
For real.
actually, that is me holding back. I have a lot.
Oh, really?
I didn't really get along with her. So she had this thing that people with disabilities shouldn't do a full load because I wouldn't be able to handle it. And like my issue was with getting into the classroom. So I don't know where you went for CJ, but I went to Vanier.
Yeah, I went
Um,
to Centennial in the West
okay,
End. Yeah.
so
And I went to Concordia after.
Vanier had different buildings, and back in my
Mhm.
day, you little spoiled chits that are watching this, back in my day, we didn't have no little cover or heated pathway to walk through. We had to walk
We didn't
through
have
the
computers
snow
in my
to
day.
get through. We had to go use those dot matrix printers. There wasn't these instant. I always laugh because, like,
With the giant cartridge.
if my internet isn't instantaneous, I lose my mind. And I remember the dial up where like you could
Yeah,
only
the
go check email. Exactly. You could only go check email if it was like a half-hour break, because otherwise you'd have no time to be able to log on and get your email. Um, so anyway, I was doing
and you
this.
have to log on and walk like to another floor to get your printout.
Exactly, exactly. And that took longer because I wasn't a fast walker. So imagine that. But if I wanted to print, I had to have like a 2 hour break just to have time to go to the printer. But I remember, so because I didn't do a full load, I had made some classes up. So I did like this French intensive that was like a 6 week intensive class, and it ended the day of game four. And I remember a friend of mine, and the game four was in LA, and a friend of mine was like, "Oh, Mike, let's go to the forum and watch the game on closed circuit TV." It was like a $2 donation to Saint Justine,
And
and
you're
you could go
sitting in
watch.
the, yeah, I
And
remember
you just
those
sit
days.
in the
I never
regular
went,
seat.
but I remember those. Yeah.
And so the guy said to me, and I remember saying to my friend, "Well, why would we pay money to go watch? We can watch at home or go at a bar or something." And he's like, "No, no, it'll be fun." I am so glad I went because I've never experienced anything like that. It was 20,000 people in the forum, and I remember John Leclerc scored in overtime. And I've never seen organized chaos like that. The place completely erupted,
Went
and
nuts.
everybody piled out onto St. Catherine Street, and everyone was high fiving each other and like celebrating. And so my friend, then we got his car and we started driving around. And now a normal person honks a horn, beep beep, right? My friend, the idiot, just jammed on his door like, "Eh," and kept on doing
Just
that.
leaning on it.
And after a while, it stopped. We stopped hearing it. And like honestly, I think hockey's good. Like I know people say sports aren't important. Important. I think sports is great the way it brings people together. Like it wasn't English and French. It was
Yeah.
20,000 people. There was one person who showed up in a Kings jersey. He got picked up and carried out by 6 people. They were very gentle, though. I'll give them credit.
It
It
was for
wasn't
his
like
own
anything
safety.
rough. It was a gentle that they picked him up and walked out with him.
Just,
I don't know what happened once he got out,
yeah.
but they were very gentle about it. Now, admittedly, that was like at the beginning of the evening, so they hadn't had more beer. I feel like it would have been a different story
Oh
at
yeah.
the end, but
By like period halfway through period two. It
yeah,
was
yeah. But everybody just piles out. So we pull up to my house at it must have been about 3:30 in the morning because the game was in LA, so till it ended and stuff. 3:30 in the morning, my friend lets me out, and then he opens his window. He calls me. He goes, "Michael, I can't get my car out of park." So there's a safety feature on the Honda Accord that if your horn's not working because he blew out his horn, it won't come out of park until you change the fuse. So I now go into my house. I get a flashlight so I can help him change the fuse. I remember my mom was half asleep. She's like, "How was the game?" I go, "Good, they won." And I'm like, "I'm just gonna go help John change a fuse on his horn." And she's like, "Okay, have fun," because I don't think she fully registered what I was saying. So we changed the fuse. The next day, his mom's using her car. She goes to honk the horn, and it blows out again. So apparently he short circuited the system that anytime you would honk, the fuse would go.
Oh,
So she had to
jeez.
get it fixed. So it actually got fixed for game five. And we went downtown, but our reservation got canceled. So we ended up in this little Lebanese cafe called Boustans on the corner of the Mezzanine and Crescent. And my friend had built a replica of the cup so that he put that on the counter. And the guys were excited because they're like, "All right, let's get a party going. It's
Yeah.
good for business." So we're washing, and like on the third period, as the night went on, the celebration started getting more and more, and like the police are coming, and I'm like, they're washing us, and I'm like, "Okay, guys, really, we're not the people you should be looking at because like I was the tallest of all the guys. Like I don't think we're gonna be starting shit." So anyway, they win. We go out onto St. Catherine Street. There was a guy standing on a car giving out beer. Um, and we took a beer. And then there was a woman selling for $5 Canadian, like those big fingers. So I bought one of
Those
those.
big foam fingers.
Yeah, yeah. I bought one of those. Um, and then the next morning I come down. So we were then someone took my friend's cup and started passing it down, like passing the cup like the teens do. And then my friend's like, the bowl that he used was his late father's bowl that his mom
Oh.
would kill him if he lost. So my friend's now
He used
running
it
down
on
St.
the
Catherine trying to get back the cop, which he did. And then when the police stopped smiling and we saw a guy fly across St. Catherine Street, we're like, okay, let's get out of here.
time to go.
It's probably a good time to leave. And then by the time we got back into our house, back to my friend's house, we heard they actually called in the army. So we're like, okay,
Yeah,
that was
because the
good
riot.
timing.
Yeah, because they rioted like what 2 years in a row or something.
Well, what was stupid and what kind of annoyed me was so like most times you have the shit disturbers who hijack stuff to go and riot,
Mm.
and you have like because after the fact, so the Canadians, because they won in Montreal, the players wanted to go out and bring the cup to the clubs and celebrate with fans,
Yeah,
which I mean honestly I would have
which
been
would have been cool. Yeah.
okay. I'm ready to die now. Like I'm good.
Exactly. Exactly.
I
Like, how cool would that
I
have
got
been?
I got to hang out with the Stanley Cup and the Montreal Canadiens. Everything else is gravy.
You got to drink out
Um,
of it. You know.
but the police actually said like asked them to stay at the Bell Center because they couldn't promise them safety. Like they were worried
Yeah, they
what
get
would
mobbed.
happen.
Holy
Which
cow.
I was kind of disappointed because I'm like, honestly, I know people say, "Oh, sports fans." Real fans were not the ones looting and breaking shit.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's true.
people way too intoxicated were the ones breaking shit.
They're falling and
Um,
tripping into shit.
although the interesting fact is the next morning when I looked at the paper on page A7 of the Montreal Gazette, there was a picture of a guy breaking a Depanneur window, taking a case of beer. I'm like, oh my God, that's the guy that gave us beer. So yeah, the beer I got was actually
It
stolen
was
beer.
contraband.
Yeah, yeah. So
It's like looted beer.
if
Holy
anybody owning a Depanneur that had a case of beer stolen, I owe you some money and I apologize.
Not
Put
you,
a
that
comment
guy does.
below. I'll send you the money. I
Oh
feel
my god.
I
Like,
felt a
people
little
just lose
bit.
their minds.
I felt a little bad about that. Like I wouldn't like that's not my style to like.
Exactly. Exactly. You didn't know, and you're caught in the
I
revelry. You're not thinking that
I'm
somebody
like
stole
let's
this.
celebrate, right?
Exactly.
I didn't
Exactly. You're in
think I'm like
celebration
how
mode.
nice the guy bought beer.
How generous.
I'm like what a generous guy,
Yeah,
an
he's good to
outstanding
everyone.
citizen. But yeah, so there you
That's
go.
crazy.
So I'm a fugitive. That's my-
You've been on the run
I've been
since
on the run. I
since
finally
95.
came clean. Yeah,
There's gonna be a knock on your door in like 10 minutes.
yeah. If you hear the door break down, can you start the GoFundMe for my bail?
I will. I
That would be
promise.
awesome.
I promise
I
I will.
appreciate that. Yeah. So how did you get started in comedy?
Um, I had always been in love with stand-up comedy, and I wanted to do it since I was about 15 or 16 years old, but I was too afraid. And when I moved to Toronto, I lived in Toronto for 18, almost 18 years before I moved to Ottawa. And I kept signing up and dropping out of a class given by Absolute in Toronto. Um, but when I moved to Ottawa, because a lot of things had happened, like a relationship ended, my mother passed away, I got this new job and I moved. There was just a whole lot of change in my life. And I was like, it's now or never. I was like, all the things that I was too afraid to try, I want to try. I want to do at least once, sort of thing. And so I signed up for Pierre Bro's class at
Okay.
Absolute, and I think the class was in August, and like what ran from August to end of September, and
Right.
I was hooked from like I could not wait to get to class every Monday to like hear the jokes, to do my jokes and get feedback. I was just so excited. And then my very first performance, which was our last class, um, I remember I was nervous up until Pierre called my name. And then when I got up there, like the 6 minutes went like that. And the laughter and all, like when I got that first laugh, it was intoxicating, you know?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
it was so intoxicating. And I was like, ah, because because that was a Monday night. I didn't sleep until Tuesday night. I was so fired up and like,
Yeah. It's like a drug.
oh, for sure.
And you know what? Honestly, I still get nervous until I get the first laugh every show
Yeah.
because every audience, and like what I find, because as you've seen in my comedy, a lot of it is my disability, my personal story, and it's almost and because it's like personal, it's almost like if they don't like the joke, they don't like you.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah. That exactly.
I
Exactly.
it so every show I do until I get that first laugh, I
Mm,
and then once I have that first laugh, then I'm a
you
little
relax.
calmer and more. I'm like, okay, they like me, and then if like I start losing them a bit, the nerves kind of come back in and like, why are you doing this to yourself? What is wrong?
Yeah,
Um,
I get excited. I don't know if it's nerves. I might feel a little something, but as soon, like right before it's my turn, but usually it's like a mix of like adrenaline and excitement with a little bit of nerves. Because it's the same thing. It's the unknown until you
yeah,
get that first laugh, you know?
I
So,
think there. I'm trying to remember who it was. I want to say Scott Falconbridge, but I'm not sure. But I remember it was it was a comic who's like a pro touring comic, and he said that if he doesn't get nervous before a show, he's gonna have a bad set. I
yeah,
don't remember if it was Scott or someone else, but he
that
once
makes
said
sense.
that,
You got to
and
feel
it does.
something. Yeah.
It kind of gives you that edge, right? Whereas if you just whatever, you kind of more laid back. You don't have that fire in you, right?
Yeah, yeah, because I think you gotta feel something. I think for me at least, I think the minute I'm like, "Bah, whatever," it's time to stop, you
Yeah,
know? You gotta feel something, some kind of whether it's nerves or just excitement or some kind of rush, you gotta feel something, I think.
it was funny. Someone once said to me that, Mike, it really looks like you're enjoying yourself on the stage. And I remember saying, so like my background's accounting, right? And at the time I was doing a consulting contract. And I said, here's the thing, like I may not necessarily, I mean, it's okay, but it's not necessarily fun doing that work,
Mhm.
but I enjoy that at the beginning of the month, I get an email saying money was deposited into my account, right?
Yeah.
So there's that factor. In comedy, there's not that much money that gets or if there is, the odd gig that pays well, they're few and far between, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like there's got to be another payoff than the money side, right?
Yeah, 'cause it's clearly not money in comedy.
It, I mean, maybe also at the level I'm at, it's not money, but even as you go up, there's only so much money
Mhm.
there will be, and that's okay.
Yeah,
To me, it's more about the art. Like
yeah.
what really drives me is like if I'm out and someone come up to me, hey, I saw you do a comedy show, and I really and I always wait because I'm like, and they're like, no, you were good. I'm like, okay, because
You're like,
like
"Phew."
if you, so people listening to this, if you're gonna say I saw you do comedy, follow it up with a compliment because otherwise, if you say nothing, like I don't know if I
We
give the
hate that.
impression that we're secure people. I'm not a secure person. I am not. I like positive reinforcement. Um, so saying I saw you do comedy and that's it. I'm like,
And
and was it good? Was it bad? Like,
what are you trying to say?
did you remember me because it was good? Are you afraid to tell a guy in a wheelchair he sucks? That's fine. You can tell me I suck. It's okay. But yeah, so yeah, fun
Oh,
stuff.
it is fun. It is fun. And so because we're gonna wrap up soon,
Okay.
but tell me how you got started with the collaborative comedy competition.
So the way it got started was that I wanted to do a wheelchair accessible comedy show. Just because a full disclosure, the reality is that it's getting harder and harder for me to do stairs. So I wanted to kind of set up a room that at least I knew if I, so because of the disability, like when I went to when both my hips were constructed, and the theory was that they would get me through school, which my hips are now on like borrowed time, I guess you could say. And or so I don't know if my hips are on borrowed time or my doctor thought I was an idiot and it would take me a really long time to finish school, one or the other. Um, but and I'm pretty sure my at least one of my hips is on its last legs. I love that joke, last legs, hip. No, okay. Disabled human people, disabled. It Laughter is therapy. So that weighed on the back of my mind because I have no issue with if I need to have the hip replaced. I just want to be sure that I think I'd be more upset about being not being able to do comedy anymore than the actual surgery.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
like I've had 9 surgeries, so like another one, I'm like whatever.
Mm,
I got the routine. Like I remember by the 8th one, the anesthesiologist came to do it, give us the speech, and I started telling her what she had to say. I'm like, I've heard this, I know it.
You're like,
Move
I know the
on.
drill.
Can I go play now? Because but so there was that aspect. I wanted something wheelchair accessible, and also for performers. Because if you think about it, the only venues that are wheelchair accessible in Ottawa are the satellite rooms where you have to get booked on. So how does someone with a disability who's never done comedy get booked on their shows if they can't do open mics because it's not accessible?
Right.
Like, right?
Right.
So that was what the main driving force. So I had tried different places. And then Carlinwood Shopping Center, Cobry Restaurant. I was in there for lunch and asked the owners if they'd be willing to do a comedy show. So we started that March 3rd. As
Yeah.
you were on the first show, right?
Yeah. I was. I was.
Right. I was trying to remember. I'm like, I know you've
Yeah.
done some of the online ones, but I
Yeah.
thought
I
you did
was at that
the
first
first one.
show. Yeah. With Paul.
Um.
I faced off with Paul Ash.
Okay. There you
Yeah.
go.
Who
And
smoked
and
me, by the
and you
way.
don't. No, but it was close though. The votes were like there was a
Was
mix
it?
of cards. I don't remember
Okay.
the
I
exact
felt he
number.
smoked me.
We're gonna get rid of the like we're even when we go back live, we'll probably get rid of the cards just because I feel
The
like
public
people
one.
don't want to be holding things. So we're just gonna do show of hands. I'm like, okay, let's forget the cards for now. And then I've been looking how to make that. So for now, we've moved it online. The idea about collaborative comedy. So the reason for collaborative is that the audience collaborates by giving in topics and picking the winners. The giving in topics, I actually got the idea from Sean Carson. You must have met. I'm trying to think if he left Ottawa before you moved, or because Sean
Because
Carson's now in Toronto.
I moved here in February of 19, and I
Okay,
only
yeah.
started comedy in the summer,
Okay, so that was so
September.
Sean was before, but Sean used to do a show called Off the Rails, and one of the things was you do your set, and then you would take a suggestion. There'd be different games you could play, and one
Okay.
of the games was that the audience would suggest something. And I thought that was
Okay.
kind of rather than doing just another open mic, I
Right.
would do that. So that's how we started the collaborative comedy, and now we moved it on to Zoom. Um, and I haven't fully figured out if we're gonna keep online going in addition to live shows when the live shows come back, or have simultaneously that like the live is being broadcasted by Zoom for people. I don't know if we've gained enough abstraction outside of Ottawa that it makes sense to do that.
Okay.
I haven't fully. I'll be honest. Part of it is I feel like it's so hard to make decisions nowadays because you don't really know what's happening.
Yeah.
That
Exactly.
you kind of just
Exactly.
go with, okay, well, you know what? Like
Yeah. For
I've now
this
booked,
week or for the next 2 weeks. Yeah.
yeah, book a couple of shows, and then although I think I actually had gone to Cobre's today for lunch because they now have pickup. So
Oh yes, I saw you had announced that a few days
um,
ago.
I went to pick it up, and I was chatting with them, and we're like, yeah, it probably won't be till end of the summer before you can really do an actual show, and even even if we were to social distance, I mean, I know there was the issue out in Edmonton with Vic Bronson's comic strip that he opened, and then they shut him down because apparently comedy is more dangerous than eating. Because when you laugh, you spit, and that could
Yeah.
transmit the disease. They haven't fully figured out what happens if people are sitting and eating and laughing together. Yeah.
It
Although I
just
took that as a compliment.
combust. It just
I,
burst into flames.
I took that as a compliment though, because they're assuming that we would be funnier
Yes.
than just
That we're
people
gonna
sitting
kill people
around.
with laughter.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the whole safety first thing, but I think there's also a mental health component to like. I think comedy it plays a role, especially with all the not chaos going on in the world. I think it's helpful to be able to escape and laugh for a bit.
Definitely.
So yeah, so we're continuing with the collaborative comedy. There's the group on Facebook, Collaborative Comedy Competition Group, which people are invited to join. That was my subtle plug, or not so subtle plug.
No, I was gonna ask you to plug it. I was gonna tell you to plug it. Plug whatever you need to
Because that way
before we
the
go.
club is the group. That way when I do events, I can invite people because I'm like, I don't really care to invite 500 people if you're not interested in coming. It's a waste of both our time.
Hmm.
So if you're interested in knowing about the events, join the
Join the
group.
group.
You'll get the invitations. Um, and we also have a page. And also, which I have not started yet. So my side hobby is rappelling off buildings in my spare time. So back in 2017, so I actually did it the first time in 2009, and then I've done it a total of 14 times. Either 13 times, either this year it's the 15th or the 14th. I
Wow.
think it might be the 14th, although I kind of hoped it was the 15th. But and hopefully the last. So back in 2017, I said I'm going to raise 15,000 for Easter seals by going across the country, because I thought that's a fun way to see Canada, and I can do some shows while I'm on the road. And so I was going to do all the cities. So there were 9 cities. In the end, I did 5. And at the end, I was interviewed on Rogers Daytime for the wrap up party to promote the wrap up party we were doing. And they said that, and one of my guys that was helping me, he's like, don't mention the number because in theory, we've been saying you did 9 and you only did 5. And I'm like, okay, I repelled off 5 buildings. Like, who's gonna go? Oh, but you didn't do 9.
You're supposed
How
to
many
do 9.
buildings did you do, asshole? But that was super fun. Like, I had a video. I did a promo video hanging off a building in Vancouver, going, guys, I'm just hanging out in Vancouver. And I'm like, I'm rappelling off buildings. You just have to show up to a barbecue and eat. You're really getting the good deal here. So I'm actually
who's got the better deal? Yeah.
I haven't started the fundraising page yet for this year, but I'm planning to do the Toronto one in September. I'm hoping that COVID will allow us to be able to get down and do it. So if anyone wants to join the Drop 150 Challenge page, you can find out. I'll be posting on there the fundraising for this year. And I'm also coming out with.
Put the details in the comments.
Yeah,
when I post the video.
Exactly. And then we also have the. I'm also planning to start merchandise. So I actually was planning to make. I've been meaning to do T-shirts, so funny T-shirts, like T-shirts of my jokes. And then I saw that you could also customize your masks, and I'm like, once you gotta wear a mask, it seems like I lost. Actually, I got the idea from the Canadians because there's the NHL teams have masks, and I'm like,
and they have
they get enough.
On it?
Yeah, they get enough publicity. I should promote my own shit, damn it.
That's a good idea.
I feel like the Canadians are doing okay for themselves. I don't know why.
They'll be fine. They'll be fine.
Yeah, I think they'll be okay. I think 100+ years, I feel like they got a solid foothold in the province.
Yes. Yeah, they're steady. They're steady.
But yeah, so I'll post all the links in the video
Yeah.
of what I'm up to and what people can follow. So,
Okay.
but this was fun. Thank you for doing
Thank you
it.
so much.
This is
Thank you
cool.
so much. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I don't know what happened, why we couldn't stream live to Facebook today, but
I'm
we
telling
did
you,
the next best thing
I'm
and
pretty sure it was the
recorded
KK.
anyway.
Pretty
And
sure it was the KKK.
yeah,
Of
I think it was
organized.
the
Remember,
Klan or
people like this
Aryan
video.
Nations or
I
something. Yeah,
don't know.
yeah. Save us, you guys, because
Yeah, yeah. They're trying to silence
they're
us.
trying to silence us.
um, um,
Well, thank you so much. I
thank you for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time, and
Awesome.
this was a lot of fun. This was a
Yeah,
lot of
have a
fun.
great weekend, and I'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you. Okay. Bye,
Take care.
everybody.